The crows told him everything he needed to know. They were a black, swirling punctuation mark in the vast, empty sentence of the high plains, and they meant death. Caleb's horse, a tough-as-nails grulla gelding, already smelled the blood, its ears flat and its head high, white-rimmed eyes scanning the arroyo. "Easy, Cinder," Caleb murmured, his voice a low rasp. He wasn't a lawman, not anymore. He was a man who collected. Sometimes he collected bounties. Sometimes, like today, he collected debts. And the man he was tracking, Jedediah Hatcher, owed a debt that could only be paid in blood. The tracks had been easy to follow for the last 3 days. Hatcher's Red Valley gang, 7 riders, shod horses, 1 heavy wagon, cut a clear, arrogant scar across the prairie. They weren't running, they were moving. But an hour ago, the tracks had changed. Caleb had dismounted, his gloved hand hovering over the churned-up dirt. A new set of tracks had joined the main group. A lighter wagon, unshod mules, a family by the look of it. Now he saw where that new trail ended. He reined Cinder in on the ridge overlooking the dry wash. Below, the scene was a familiar, sickening tableau. The family's wagon was a ruin, its canvas cover smoldering. The mules were dead in their harnesses. The crows were feasting on the bodies of 2 men, a father and a boy by their size. Caleb's face, already hard set from years of sun and silence, tightened. He didn't ride down. He didn't need to. He'd seen Hatcher's work before. This wasn't a robbery. It was a harvest. He scanned the scene, his eyes missing nothing. The men's bodies were shot and left. The wagon was looted, flour and cornmeal scattered in the dust like a mocking snowfall. But he was looking for something else. He was looking for the 3rd set of tracks, daintier, scuffed, the tracks of a woman. He found them. They led from the wagon, scuffled and dragged, joining the main party. Hatcher hadn't just killed, he had taken. Caleb spat in the dust. This changed things. His pursuit of Hatcher had been a cold, calculated thing, a long, simmering promise he'd made to a dead friend in a dusty Texas saloon. It was a matter of honor, of balancing a ledger. Now it was a rescue. And rescues were messy. They were loud. They got people killed. He nudged Cinder into a trot following the fresh trail north. Hatcher's gang had a woman with them. That would slow them down, but not by much. It would just make them meaner, more careless. He rode hard, the sun at his back, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The tracks led toward an old, abandoned way station, a series of barns and a dry-rotted saloon that most travelers knew to avoid. It was Hatcher's territory. He rode for hours, the image of the wagon burning in his mind. He wasn't a good man, he knew that. Good men died like the ones in the wash. He was a necessary man, and he was, he thought, as he checked the load in his Winchester, getting close. The sun was setting, and the trail was only hours old. He'd catch them in the dark. Or if they'd hold up, he'd find them at dawn. Dawn broke cold and gray, the sun a weak smear behind a high bank of clouds. Caleb had been in position for an hour, lying flat on a rocky rise, his spyglass trained on the way station. Hatcher's men were there. Their horses were in the main corral. A thin tendril of smoke rose from the chimney of the old saloon. 7 men, but the wagon was gone, and Hatcher wasn't with them. Caleb's gut clenched. He'd missed them. Hatcher and the main wagon had pushed on, leaving a rear guard. He watched, frustration, a bitter taste in his mouth. The men were lazy, drinking, passing a bottle around a morning fire. He was about to pull back, to circle wide and pick up Hatcher's trail, when he saw it. Movement! In the old, dilapidated barn set apart from the main buildings, it wasn't one of the outlaws. It was a shadow flitting past a gap in the rotten boards. Caleb adjusted his spyglass. The barn door was barred from the outside. They had left her, locked her in. He watched for 10 minutes. No guards. The men at the fire were confident, their attention on the bottle. He slid back from the ridge, his movements as silent as a snake's. He led Cinder through a deep arroyo, circling until he was on the blind side of the barn. He tethered the horse, pulled his Winchester from its scabbard, and moved on foot. The air was still. He could hear the low murmur of the men's voices, the crackle of their fire. He reached the back wall of the barn, his back flat against the sun-warped wood. He eased his way to the side door. It was locked. He moved to the massive front doors. A heavy iron bar was dropped across them. He drew his sidearm, a heavy Colt, and used the barrel to slowly, quietly lift the bar. It was heavy, and it groaned in protest. The men at the fire didn't look up. He lifted it clear and let it fall silently in the deep dust. He slipped inside, his eyes struggling to adjust to the gloom. The barn was vast and dark, the air thick with the smell of old hay and decay. High above, shafts of morning light cut through the broken roof, illuminating columns of swirling dust like a ruined cathedral. He heard a scuffle, a small, terrified gasp. "Show yourself," he said, his voice low. He kept the Colt raised. From the deepest, darkest stall, a figure emerged, hands half raised. She stumbled into one of the beams of light, and Caleb's breath caught. It was the woman, Eliza. Her face was a mask of dirt and tears. Her simple dress torn at the shoulder, revealing a dark, angry bruise on her hip. She was trembling so violently she could barely stand. "Please," she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. He said he'd be back. Please." She thought he was one of them. "I'm not them," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. He holstered his pistol, a deliberate, slow movement. "I'm here to help." She just stared, uncomprehending. She was broken, her mind somewhere else, still trapped in the horror of the last 2 days. He stepped toward her, into the shaft of light. "We have to go. Now, before they see us." He reached for her, his hand closing on her upper arm. The touch was too firm. It was a mistake. She shattered. A raw, primal scream tore from her throat, a sound of such profound agony and terror that Caleb froze. She collapsed, her legs giving out, and she fell against him. Her hands came up, not to fight him, but to claw at her own face, as if trying to wipe away the images burned into her memory. "No, no, no, no," she sobbed, a hysterical, broken litany. He was a tracker, a fighter. He was not a comforter. He grabbed her, his hands firm on her shoulders, trying to steady her, to shake her back to sanity. "Quiet," he hissed. "They'll hear you." But she was gone, lost in a storm of grief. She was crying for her father, for her brother, for the violence that had ripped her world apart. He saw it then, the men at the fire, their heads snapping up. They'd heard. "Damn it!" he snarled. He grabbed Eliza, pulling her upright. She was a dead weight, weeping uncontrollably. He held her against him, one arm clamped around her back, the other hand on her shoulder, his face a mask of grim resolve. This was the moment in the image. He was her protector, her captor, her only way out. "It's all right," he said, the words feeling foreign and false. "You're safe. I've got you." He half dragged, half carried her toward the back wall. "We're leaving. Now." Her tears soaked the front of his vest. but his eyes were on the barn door, his mind already calculating the angles of the coming fight. He didn't take her out the front. He'd seen a loose set of boards on the back wall when he'd approached. He kicked them open, the rotten wood giving way with a splintering crash. "Through here! Run!" he yelled, shoving her through the gap. She stumbled and fell, landing hard in the dust outside. The shock of the fall, the sudden bright light, cleared her head for a precious second. A shot rang out, the bullet thwacking into the wood above Caleb's head. The men were coming, fanning out around the sides of the barn. "To the arroyo! To my horse!" Caleb yelled. He burst out of the barn after her, firing 2 quick shots from his Colt toward the corner of the building. It wasn't aimed fire, it was cover. Go! Now, Eliza. He didn't know her name, but it was the first one that came to his mind, a name from a past he kept buried. The woman didn't question it. She scrambled to her feet and ran, her torn dress flapping, her bare feet stumbling on the rocky ground. Caleb ran after her, a rear guard of one, another shot, this one closer. He dropped to one knee, aimed and fired. A man screamed and fell, 1 down, 6 to go. "Get on the horse!" he roared as they reached the edge of the arroyo. She was fumbling with the reins, trying to mount Cinder, her hands shaking. He shoved her bodily into the saddle, not caring for modesty, and slapped the horse's rump. "Ride! South! Don't stop!" He didn't mount. He couldn't. They'd be a big target, 2 on 1 horse, and Cinder wasn't fast enough to outrun 6 fresh horses. "What about you?" she screamed, her face a pale oval of terror. "I'll slow them down." "Go." He turned and ran, not with her, but down the arroyo, deeper into the broken land. He heard the shouts of the men, the thunder of their horses. He was the bait. He was better on his feet in the rocks than they were on horseback. He ran for half a mile, the sound of pursuit echoing behind him. He found his spot, a narrow cut in the rock, a perfect bottleneck. He slid into it, his Winchester in his hands, and waited. They came just as he knew they would. 2 of them riding hard, eager for the kill. He let them get close. He let them see him. He raised his rifle. The first shot took the lead rider in the chest. The second took the horse of the man behind him. The man jumped clear, landing in a cloud of dust, and opened fire. The bullets ricocheted off the rocks, sending stone chips stinging into Caleb's face. He stayed cool. He waited. The man reloaded. In that brief, fatal silence, Caleb stepped out, aimed, and fired. The third shot was perfect. He waited. Silence. The other 4, they were smarter. They weren't coming into the arroyo. They would circle. He was trapped. But he'd bought her time. Hours, maybe. He settled in, his back against the rock, his rifle across his knees. The sun climbed, and the arroyo became an oven. He had no water. He had 1 box of cartridges. He checked his Colt. 6 shots. He was a practical man. He weighed his life against the bounty, against the promise he'd made. It was a bad trade. But then he thought of the woman, Eliza. He thought of her face, shattered by grief, and the dark, ugly bruise on her hip. He'd spent 10 years tracking men like Hatcher, 10 years cleaning up the messes left by civilization's failures. He'd always told himself it was just a job. The money was good. But sitting in the arroyo, waiting for 4 men to come and kill him, he knew it was a lie. He wasn't a collector, he was a protector. He just never had anyone to protect. He heard a rock skitter high up on the rim. He raised his rifle. "Come and get it," he whispered. The sun was a hammer beating on the rocks of the arroyo. Caleb had been trapped for 6 hours. The 4 outlaws were patient. They held the high ground, taking pot shots at him, not trying to hit him, just reminding him they were there. They were waiting for thirst to do their job. Caleb's tongue was a dry, swollen thing in his mouth. He was counting his cartridges again. 24. He wasn't going to die of thirst. He'd go out fighting when the sun set. He heard a whistle, high and thin. Not a bird. He looked up. On the opposite rim, silhouetted against the blazing sky, was a rider, a new one. It was her, Eliza. Damn fool, he breathed. He waved a frantic, angry gesture. Get out! Get back! She didn't move. Then a rifle shot cracked, not from her, but from beside her. One of the outlaws on the rim cried out and toppled backward. Caleb's head snapped around. A second rider, and a third, men in dusty blue uniforms. Cavalry, another volley of shots. The outlaws who had him pinned were suddenly in a crossfire. They broke cover, running for their horses. They didn't make it. Caleb watched, stunned, as the fight ended in less than 30 seconds. The cavalry patrol, a lieutenant and 2 privates, rode down into the arroyo. Eliza was with them. She slid off Cinder before the horse even stopped and ran to him. She wasn't crying this time. Her face was streaked with sweat and dust, her eyes burning with a fierce, terrible light. She was carrying his saddlebags. I took your water, she said, her voice a hoarse croak, as she unslung his canteen and handed it to him. Caleb took it, unstoppered it, and drank. The water was warm, but it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. He drank half of it before he stopped, wiping his mouth on his sleeve. I told you to ride south, he said, his voice rough. You told me to ride, she corrected. I found the main road. I found them. She nodded at the soldiers. They were on patrol from Fort Stanton. I told them what happened. To my family, to you. The young lieutenant dismounted, his face grim. Ma'am, we'd heard reports of Hatcher's gang. We just never knew where to find them. He looked at Caleb. You're Caleb Stone, aren't you? Heard of you? You saved this woman's life. She saved mine, Caleb said, getting to his feet, his legs stiff. We found her family's wagon, the lieutenant said, his voice quiet. He removed his hat. We buried them. I'm sorry, ma'am. But we found something else. Hatcher's main wagon. It broke an axle not 5 miles from here. Caleb's head snapped up. Hatcher, he's there. With the rest of his gang, they're trying to fix it. They don't know we're here. They don't know this rear guard is dead. Caleb looked at Eliza. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set. He turned to the lieutenant. You got 3 men. 4 with you, the lieutenant said. They got a dozen. At least. They're on foot, Mr. Stone. We're on horses. We have the element of surprise, and we have her. He nodded at Eliza. She's a witness. I have cause to engage. I'm going to stop them for her family. Caleb looked at the young, determined officer. He looked at Eliza, who was watching him, her hand on Cinder's neck. This was his chance. He could take his horse and ride away. He had saved her. His job was done, but Hatcher was 5 miles away, on foot. Give me my horse, Caleb said. He took the reins from Eliza. You, he said to her, you'll stay with the supply wagon. You're done. No, she said. This is not a discussion. I'm not fighting, she said, her voice shaking but firm. But I'm going to see it. I'm going to see the end of him. Caleb looked at her, at the iron in her spine. He thought of the crying, broken woman in the barn. They were 2 different people. He nodded once. Stay behind the soldiers. He swung into the saddle, his Winchester feeling light and balanced in his hand. He looked at the lieutenant. Let's go pay a debt, They found them exactly as the lieutenant had said. Red Canyon was less a canyon and more a deep, rocky scar in the earth. Hatcher's wagon, a massive Conestoga, was stranded, its rear axle snapped and propped up on boulders. The outlaws, 10 of them, were scattered, working on the repair, their horses picketed. Hatcher himself, a big man in a black duster, was directing the work, his voice a low, angry bellow. Caleb, the lieutenant, and the 2 privates took up positions on the rim, hidden in a cluster of juniper trees. Eliza was 50 yards behind them, holding the horses, her face a pale, grim mask. "This is a kill box," Caleb whispered. "They've got no cover." "Mr. Stone," the lieutenant said, his voice tight, "when I give the order, I want you to take Hatcher. He's the head of the snake. We'll handle the rest." Caleb just nodded, his eye already sighting down the barrel of his Winchester. He had a clear shot. He centered the iron sight on the V of Hatcher's duster. "Red Valley Gang!" the lieutenant yelled, his voice cracking the afternoon silence. "This is Lieutenant Davies of the United States Cavalry. You are under arrest for murder and theft. Throw down your arms." Hatcher's head snapped up. His face, bearded and brutal, was a mask of pure rage. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed his own rifle. "To the rocks!" he roared. "Fire!" the lieutenant screamed. The world exploded. The 4 rifles on the ridge fired as one. Hatcher stumbled, grabbing his shoulder, his rifle clattering to the ground. 2 of his men fell and didn't get up. The rest scattered, just as Caleb knew they would, running for the cover of the rocks and the wagon. "They're pinned!" Davies yelled, reloading. Caleb wasn't paying attention. He was watching Hatcher. The outlaw leader was wounded, but not dead. He was scrambling, crawling behind the wagon toward the picketed horses. "He's running," Caleb said, his voice a low growl. He stood up. "Stone, get down!" the lieutenant yelled. But Caleb was already moving, sliding down the scree slope, running toward the canyon floor. This wasn't the Army's fight. It was his. He landed hard, his legs jarring, and ran for the wagon, his Colt in his hand. Hatcher was there, trying to cut a horse loose. He saw Caleb, and his face twisted. He drew his own revolver. The 2 men fired at the same time. Caleb felt a white-hot poker sear his left side, spinning him around. He grunted, stumbling, but his own shot had hit home. Hatcher was on his knees, his gun in the dust. Caleb walked toward him, his side screaming, his pistol steady. The main fight was still raging behind him, the soldiers picking off the trapped outlaws. He stopped 5 feet from Hatcher. The outlaw leader was clutching his stomach, blood seeping between his fingers. He looked up, his eyes full of surprised hatred. Who the hell are you?" Hatcher gurgled. "I'm a friend of Abe's," Caleb said. Hatcher's eyes widened. "Abe, from Texas. That was years." "He remembered you," Caleb said. "He told me to say hello." He raised the pistol. Hatcher closed his eyes. Caleb didn't fire. He let his arm drop, a wave of dizziness washing over him. He looked at the man, dying in the dirt. The rage that had carried him for 3 days, for years, was gone. It had burned out, leaving only a cold, gray ash. "It's done," he whispered. He turned and walked away, his hand pressed to his bleeding side. The gunfire had stopped. The lieutenant was shouting orders. He made it to the edge of the canyon and sank to his knees. He heard her before he saw her. "Caleb!" Eliza was there, her hands fluttering over his wound. "You're hit." "Oh, God, you're hit." "It's nothing," he lied, gritting his teeth. "You're a damn fool, Caleb Stone," she said, her voice thick, but she was already ripping a strip of cloth from her own torn dress to make a bandage. She worked with a fierce, practiced efficiency, her hands no longer shaking. "I told you to wait," he panted, "and I told you I'd see the end," she said. She finished the knot, her hands tight and sure. He's done," Caleb said. They looked back at the canyon. The soldiers were rounding up the 3 surviving outlaws. It was over. Eliza helped him to his feet, his arm slung over her shoulder. They were a mirror of the moment in the barn, but everything was different. She was no longer the broken, weeping victim. He was no longer the cold, detached tracker. "Come on, cowboy," she said, her voice soft. "Let's get you to a doctor. You got a lot of explaining to do. You told me your name was Caleb." He looked at her confused. "It is." "No," she said, a small, weary smile touching her lips. "The name on your saddle. Your real name. You told me her name." He looked at his saddle, at the small faded tooling on the leather he'd covered years ago. Eliza, his wife. Dead 10 years. He looked at the woman holding him up,